Welcome to Psychedepthh. I'm Mark Glat, and this is a space where we go beyond surface-level thinking and explore the deeper side of human psychology, emotions, behavior, and self-awareness. Here, we talk about the thoughts you don't always say out loud, the patterns in your mind, the psychology behind your emotions, and the hidden reasons why people think, feel, and act the way they do. If you've ever felt like you overthink too much, notice too deeply, or understand things others miss, you're in the right place. On Psychedepthh, we don't just talk about psychology, we break it down in a way that actually connects to real life. So if you're ready to understand yourself on a deeper level, stay with us, because this journey into the mind has just begun. High self-awareness is often seen as a strength, and in many ways it is. But what most people don't talk about is the emotional weight that comes with it. When you become highly aware of your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and even the subtle patterns in others, life doesn't necessarily become simpler. It becomes more detailed, more layered, and sometimes more overwhelming. A person with high self-awareness doesn't just go through situations, they observe themselves going through them. While others might laugh, react, or move on quickly, the highly aware mind pauses and analyzes everything. Why did I react like that? Was that response genuine or defensive? What does this say about me? Over time, this constant self-observation can feel like carrying a mental mirror that never turns off. This is where life starts to feel heavier, not because reality changes, but because perception changes. You begin to notice emotional undercurrents in conversations that others miss. You see inconsistencies in people's behavior more clearly. You become aware of your own patterns, your triggers, insecurities, and repeated mistakes. While this awareness can help you grow, it can also make ordinary experiences feel emotionally dense. For example, a simple argument that others forget in minutes might stay in your mind for hours or even days. Not because you are weak, but because your mind keeps replaying it from different angles. You analyze tone, intention, timing, and meaning. This depth of processing creates emotional intensity that others may never experience in the same way. Another hidden burden is responsibility. High self-awareness often comes with a sense of accountability for your actions, emotions, and even outcomes that are not entirely under your control. You start questioning yourself more than you question others. And while this can lead to personal growth, it can also create internal pressure that feels constant and exhausting. But it is important to understand something. This heaviness is not a flaw. It is depth. You are not broken for feeling more deeply. You are simply perceiving more layers of reality. The challenge is not to lose awareness, but to learn how to manage it. Without balance, awareness turns into overthinking. With balance, it becomes wisdom. Learning to step back from your thoughts, allowing yourself to experience life without always analyzing it, is key. Not every moment needs interpretation. Not every feeling needs investigation. Sometimes, living is enough. If you are someone who relates to this, remember, you are not alone in this mental experience. There are many people silently carrying the same level of awareness, trying to make sense of a world that often feels too fast and too shallow. If this message resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel for more psychology-based insights like this. And share this with someone who always thinks too much. They might finally feel understood. People who are too aware often assume that awareness will make life easier, but in reality, it usually makes life more intense. Instead of reducing suffering, high awareness changes the quality of suffering. It becomes deeper, more detailed, and harder to ignore. When someone is highly aware, they don't just feel emotions, they analyze them while they are happening. If they feel hurt, they don't only experience the pain, they also start questioning it. Why did this hurt me so much? Was my reaction too emotional? What does this say about me? This second layer of thinking runs alongside the emotion itself, which makes the experience feel heavier than it actually is. Most people move through emotions in a linear way. Something happens, they feel it, and then they eventually let it go. But highly aware individuals tend to loop through the same emotional moment repeatedly in their mind.
They revisit conversations, tone of voice, facial expressions, and hidden meanings. This constant mental replay doesn't always bring clarity. It often intensifies the emotional impact. This is why they don't necessarily suffer more events, but they suffer more deeply from the same events. A small misunderstanding that others forget in minutes can stay alive in their thoughts for hours or even days. Not because they are weak, but because their perception captures more detail than average. They see layers that others simply don't notice. Another important aspect is self-awareness. People who are highly aware are often very conscious of their own behavior. While this can lead to growth and maturity, it also creates internal pressure. They may overthink their reactions, judge themselves more harshly, and constantly try to correct their emotional responses. This self-monitoring adds another emotional layer on top of whatever they are already feeling. In relationships, this can be even more intense. They may pick up subtle changes in tone, distance, or behavior that others miss completely. This makes them more sensitive to emotional shifts, which can lead to confusion or overanalysis even when nothing is actually wrong. However, it is important to understand that this depth is not a weakness. It is a different way of processing life. High awareness gives clarity, insight, and emotional intelligence. But it also requires balance. Without balance, the mind becomes a place of constant analysis instead of peace. Learning to pause mental interpretation is crucial. Not every feeling needs explanation. Not every moment needs meaning attached to it. Sometimes emotions are just experiences, not problems to solve. In the end, being too aware means you don't experience life on the surface. You experience it in layers. And while that can feel overwhelming at times, it also gives you a level of understanding that many people never reach. If this resonates with you, you're not alone. This is the reality of a deeply observant mind navigating a fast, noisy world. Being highly aware is often misunderstood as simple overthinking, but in reality, it is a very different mental experience. Overthinking usually involves unnecessary repetition of thoughts, often fueled by anxiety or uncertainty. High awareness, on the other hand, is more about perception, seeing patterns, emotions, behaviors, and hidden details that most people naturally overlook. A highly aware person doesn't just think more, they observe more. For example, in a conversation, most people focus on the words being spoken, but a highly aware individual also notices tone, timing, facial expressions, body language, and even small shifts in energy. While others hear a sentence, they are processing an entire emotional context behind it. This deeper level of perception can sometimes be mistaken for overthinking because it leads to analysis. However, the difference is important. Overthinking is often repetitive and unproductive,
while awareness is more like pattern recognition. It is the mind trying to make sense of information that actually exists, even if it is subtle or unspoken. For instance, if someone's behavior suddenly changes, most people might ignore it or assume it is random. But a highly aware person starts connecting dots. They recall previous interactions, compare emotional shifts, and try to understand what changed. This is not imagination. It is attention to detail that others may not prioritize. However, this strength comes with emotional complexity. When you notice more, you also feel more. You become sensitive to inconsistency, dishonesty, or emotional distance. This can sometimes create discomfort because you are not just experiencing reality, you are also analyzing its deeper layers in real time. The important thing to understand is that this awareness is not a flaw or a mental problem. It is a cognitive style. Some minds are built to observe deeply rather than react quickly. This can be extremely valuable in fields like psychology, leadership, creativity, and problem-solving, where understanding hidden patterns is essential. But in everyday life, especially in emotionally driven situations, this depth can feel heavy. You may find yourself questioning things others easily ignore. You may struggle to switch off your observation mode. And because your mind picks up subtle signals, you may sometimes assume meaning where others see none. This is where balance becomes important. Awareness should be a tool, not a trap. Just because you notice something doesn't always mean you need to analyze it endlessly. Learning to differentiate between meaningful insight and unnecessary mental looping is key. At its core, high awareness is not about thinking too much. It is about seeing too much. It is the ability to pick up signals that exist in the background of human behavior. But the challenge is learning when to observe and when to let things simply exist without interpretation. The idea that the more mentally aware you become, the harder it is to feel normal in a world that runs on distraction, speaks to a very real psychological shift that happens when someone starts seeing life more deeply than average. It is not about being better or worse. It is about becoming more observant in a world that often rewards surface-level thinking. Most people in modern society operate on autopilot. Daily routines, social media, conversations, and even relationships are often experienced quickly without deep reflection. The mind stays busy, but not necessarily aware. In this kind of environment, distraction is normal. Constant stimulation keeps people from sitting too long with their own thoughts or emotions. But when a person becomes mentally aware, this pattern starts to break. They begin noticing what others don't. They see inconsistencies in behavior, emotional undercurrents in conversations, and patterns in how people act versus what they say. They also become more aware of their own internal world, their thoughts, reactions, and emotional triggers. This creates a different kind of experience of reality. Because of this shift, normal starts to feel unfamiliar. What used to feel simple now feels layered. Small talk may start to feel meaningless. Fast-paced reactions may feel shallow. Even everyday interactions can begin to carry hidden meaning. The mind is no longer just participating in life. It is also analyzing it in real time. This can create a sense of separation. Not physical isolation, but psychological distance. While others are immersed in distraction, the highly aware person is often observing that distraction itself. They notice how people avoid silence, how emotions are quickly replaced with entertainment,
and how rarely people pause to reflect deeply. This awareness can make them feel out of sync with the environment around them. At the same time, this does not mean they are more correct or that others are less aware. It simply means their attention is tuned differently. Where most minds prioritize speed, social flow, and emotional ease, a highly aware mind prioritizes understanding, depth, and meaning. These two modes of living naturally feel different from each other. The challenge comes when awareness turns into over-identification. Instead of just observing differences, the person may start feeling like they don't belong. This is where discomfort grows, not because awareness itself is harmful, but because it creates constant comparison between inner depth and outer simplicity. However, feeling not normal is not necessarily a problem. It can also be a sign of expanded perception. The goal is not to return to ignorance or distraction, but to learn how to live with awareness without losing connection to everyday life. Balance is key. A person can see deeply without needing to analyze everything all the time. In reality, the world will likely always run on distraction to some extent. That is how modern life is structured. But a mentally aware person has the ability to step in and out of that flow, to observe it when needed, and to participate in it without overloading their mind. Extreme awareness can sometimes feel like a quiet form of isolation. It is not physical distance from people, but a psychological experience where your mind starts perceiving reality in a deeper, sharper, and more detailed way than those around you. You begin noticing patterns in behavior, emotional contradictions, hidden intentions, and subtle changes in people that most others naturally overlook or ignore. In everyday life, many people operate on a kind of mental autopilot. They focus on immediate tasks, surface-level conversations, and quick emotional responses. This is not necessarily a weakness. It is simply how the mind conserves energy and functions efficiently in a fast-moving world. But when someone becomes highly aware, this autopilot mode becomes more visible. You start seeing not just what people do, but why they might be doing it, and even what they are trying to avoid emotionally. This deeper perception can create a strange feeling of disconnection. It may feel like you are fully awake, while others are moving through life in a lighter, less reflective state. Conversations may feel shallow, social interactions may feel repetitive, and emotional responses may appear predictable. Over time, this can create a sense that you are observing life more than participating in it. However, this does not mean you are superior or separate from others. It simply means your attention is tuned differently. Where most people prioritize emotional comfort and simplicity, highly aware individuals often prioritize meaning and depth. This difference in perception can create an internal gap, where you feel understood less often, even in normal social settings. One of the biggest challenges of extreme awareness is over-interpretation. When you notice more details, your mind naturally tries to connect them. A small change in tone, a delayed response, or a shift in behavior can start to feel significant. While sometimes these insights are accurate, other times they can lead to unnecessary mental burden or emotional exhaustion. The key is learning balance. Awareness is a powerful tool when it helps you understand yourself and others better. But when it turns into constant analysis, it can create distance not only from others, but also from peace of mind. You don't have to analyze every moment to validate your perception. Some things are meant to be experienced, not decoded. It is also important to remember that feeling disconnected does not mean you are broken or abnormal.
It often means your mind is operating on a more reflective level. The challenge is not to suppress awareness, but to learn how to live with it without losing emotional grounding in everyday life. If this message resonates with you, consider subscribing to the channel for more psychology-based insights about the human mind, self-awareness, and emotional depth. And if you know someone who feels like they see too much in life, share this with them. They might finally understand what they've been feeling. This content is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional psychological or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are experiencing persistent emotional distress, anxiety, or difficulty coping with thoughts or feelings, please seek help from a qualified mental health professional.